Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Radio Free Wall Street. It's 5 o'clock New York time, and we are streaming on the World Wide Web, and we've had quite a day. Stock market down 391 points, oil market crashing. Europe has got itself another crisis, and this time they're not going to find that the Italians are as easy to push around as Cyprus or the Greeks were. Italians are pissed. They want to run their lives. They want to run their country. The anti-migrant movement is very strong in Italy. It's a coastal country. It sticks out way out there in the Caribbean. And there has been an invasion. Now, there's another story that is not being told of this debt crisis, and that is the fact that Italian banks have been wiping out for 10 years. And Spanish banks have been wiping out for 10 years. And Portuguese banks have been wiping out for 10 years. Oh, yeah, and French banks. The reality is that it's only been the EU bailout after bailout and endless quantum easing that has kept the European financial system afloat. Now, European Central Bank wants to maintain discipline. The problem is that the European Central Bank has a one-size-fits-all policy and does not understand the nuances and the very much difference of European nations, okay? They have different economic models. They have different styles of ruling. They have different expectations of the citizens. And these kind of things are the mistakes. They're classic. For example, Greece always had a very strong pension program, okay? It was understood that, that people would get their 1,000 euros a month retirement, and that for them worked. Among the Irish, the system of the dole was very strong. Among the Italians, it's a more complicated system with government subsidies coming in all kinds of different forms. Bank loans weren't expected to be paid back, but rolled over forever. And in return, citizens bought shares of stocks of the banks. Very interesting. Most debt holders in Italian banks are also stockholders. So it's a kind of two-tier system. But the problem is that the economy of the world has kind of caught up with old ways of doing things. And these old ways of doing things are buckling under the pressure of new ways of doing things. Now, let me explain that. The problem is that most countries of the world have to be modernized. I mean, that's a fact. And the problem is the goalpost keeps moving. In other words, as you go into a cyber economy, as you go into robotics, as you go into global competition, well, the world's a much different place. And businesses in countries that were relatively protected now find themselves competing on a global scale. And also competing against huge multinational, multi-country tradition companies, okay, like Nestle, these big food giants. And they are eating the lunch of a lot of the smaller companies. The other problem is the EU is just saddling these countries with massive regulations and a bureaucracy that just costs little businesses money. When you look at a lot of countries like, for example, France, there are a lot of little businesses there. And there are a lot of little boutique businesses that export. And what's happened is the EU is crippling them. So the backlash is two ways. But most important to realize is that there's one little secret in Europe, and that is that massive amounts of government debt, massive amounts of corporate debt, individual debt, are hidden in the sovereign holdings, the sovereign debt holdings of companies and individuals. In other words, in Europe, the system is that the central banks finance a lot of things that would not be done in America. And the way it might, one hand washes the other. The governments issue massive amounts of sovereign debt. The banks buy that sovereign debt. And then governments bail out those companies, those banks, those industries. So it's like one hand washes the other. Now, you get the IM involved in that, and they just go wild when they see that. So the secret you have is 25% of the sovereign debt holdings of the governments are held by their banking institutions. And the governments can't pay them back. And the financial institutions aren't solvent. So it's kind of a game everyone plays. I pretend like the debt I'm holding is great debt, and you pretend like I'm a solvent financial institution, and we hope nothing goes wrong. Well, the problem is bringing in competition from around the world, open the markets to outsiders, have immigration issues, aging populations, and all of a sudden, the horrible truth is Europe is in a financial crisis, and a big one. It's been hiding it for 10 years. The Central Bank of Europe has been in quantum easing. They actually buy bonds of corporations. The central bank does, which is unheard of. It doesn't happen in America that way. But the problem is that the string is running out. A lot of subsidies by the European unions. They helped 3 times Italian banks break the rules and bury their debt. And the bad banks they set up are going broke. And now we're at the point of the sovereign debt crisis globally. Because remember, sovereign debt is wiping out all over the world. You have a Latin America sovereign debt crisis. Venezuela was the first with its debt going bad with sanctions. You now have that spreading to Mexico. You have that in a beautiful country, Argentina, that's never met a debt issue it wanted to pay back. You've got it spreading to Brazil and all the smaller countries. So you now have a full-blown Latin America debt crisis. Now, enter the debt crisis from Greece, which is still there. You've got the debt crisis of Portugal. You got the debt crisis of sovereign debt crisis of Spain. Add Italy and France to that, and now you got the southern half of Europe going tapioca. Now, let me tell you the secret. The reason why this is such a critical problem is because that sovereign debt is held by U.S. banks. It is held by U.S. funds in mass, and now the debt can't be paid. And we've got a global economy that's being destabilized by 3 factors. I'll tell you what that is. Number 1 is a global recession. Nobody's fault. It's just time for one. The excesses are in the system. They have to be beaten out of it. Bankruptcies were not allowed to occur either in Europe or the United States in the last financial crisis, so you got all those bad loans with us. That's one. The second problem you got is the United States, which sets the base lending values of all debt around the world, is raising rates. So the day of free money and extremely low rates, which will help subsidizing dead broke corporations and dead broke sovereign debt holders, no longer there. Now you've got the third factor, and the third factor is the wild card of Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants to get reelected desperately. He does not want to get impeached in the meantime. And Donald Trump has come to the conclusion that he needs to keep the House. And he's right. If the House of Representatives falls to the Democrats, they will put through a bill of impeachment, and that will expose Donald Trump massively. Now, Donald Trump's been trying to kill the Mueller investigation without luck, and he has gotten concessions in lieu of a constitutional crisis, and that is that Mueller will not indict Donald Trump. The problem is, and that is not being exposed here, is that Mueller has got high crimes and misdemeanors against Donald Trump. He has got crimes against all of Donald Trump's high people on his staff, both in the campaign, during the transition, and now in Washington. So that means that Mueller will prosecute as many of Donald Trump's staff as he can. He's got 15 of them so far. He's got another 5 in the works, I understand. He will give a scathing report of collusion and impropriety, influence peddling, cronyism of the Trump administration, and he will dump it in the House of Representatives, which is Republicans. They will investigate and say, yes, Donald was bad, but he didn't go to the line of crossing that's impeachable. If the Democrats are in power, oh my God, look what Donald Trump did, and they will start impeachment proceedings immediately. So Donald Trump understands that his way out of this is keep the pressure on discrediting the Mueller probe, but ignite his constituency, the Billy Bobs of the world, and get Bob and the construction workers and the steel workers and the factory workers and unite behind Donald Trump. Well, how do you do that? Well, it's jobs. So it's jobs. So he has to be seen as the champion of the blue-collar worker of America. And he has to appeal to say, look, I am fighting a deep state conspiracy for you guys. I'm keeping your coal mine open. I'm keeping your factory assembly line going. They're trying to send it to Mexico where MS-13 gang members that are raping your blonde daughters are also taking your job. And oh my God, the Chinese, trillions of dollars of your money that would be buying you pickup trucks and get you a vacation house. and you'd have a little place in the Ozarks, and you'd be up here in the big city, and you work in Detroit, and you work in the Philadelphia steel mills, and you'd have a wonderful life, vacation house, and you'll be great again. So he needs to ignite them. And the way he ignites them is saying, look, I've got a trade war with China. I'm not going to do this NAFTA bullshit. I'm taking those factories out of Mexico. I'm in a war with Europe, and I'm doing it for you, and I need you to come out and help me because the deep state and the phony Mueller probe is trying to stop me, and it's not about collusion. Everyone knows it didn't happen. Ha, ha, ha. Nobody cares about Stormy. Those guys are pretty cool. Ha, ha, ha. It's about you and the fact that they want to take your blue-collar jobs away from you. Those college grads don't understand the great work you perform and how necessary you are to America. And if you, the farmer, weren't there, what would they eat? And if you weren't making cars, where would they get cars? And if you weren't great again, we would be wiped out. The commies would come. Oh, my God. Pretty smart ploy. So the problem is this. In order to get this whole game to work, he's got to keep the trade frictions high. He announced last week that he's going to put duty on import cars for all the good it wouldn't do. He wants content of American content in Mexican cars, which is ridiculous. Negotiations are falling apart. He's going after Europe on steel. He's going after China on manufactured goods, intellectual property, and anything under the sun. And he's basically exceeding his authority by claiming that these trade sanctions are a matter of national security. It's a good game. You can do it by presidential proclamation, but it's got a lot of problems. But it doesn't make any difference because it's affecting the global economy. Businesses say, shit, I open a factory in Canada or in Mexico. I'm going to have a shitstorm with this guy. I just don't need him tweeting me to death. I can't afford to open a factory in America, so let's not do anything. So what you've got, Europeans are saying, holy shit, tariffs on our cars? We're going to have a problem with the luxury car market. And Japanese are saying, screw you. We got razor-thin margins coming in to America anyway. We have a very high labor rate in Japan on what we're exporting into America. We can't stand the tariffs. So everyone's standing back and waiting. Now, with Fed raising rates, the U.S. economy is slipping into a recession, and recession, Asia's in a crisis. Latin America is already down the poop chute. It's gone. So it's a situation where the combination of Donald Trump, central banks, the sovereign debt crisis is creating a global depression. Now, there's one more thing. In the middle of all this, the Saudis, who are desperate for money, $8 barrel oil, decide to hold oil off the market. Now, to their profound joy, Donald Trump helped them. He announced sanctions against Venezuela and started putting it in, and concern became, would Venezuelan oil come to market? And then he attacked what no one was expecting him to do, and that was go after our good friends, the theocracy, the Iranians, putting their oil exports in jeopardy. As a result, that oil shot up, gasoline shot up, and it created another crisis around the world, an energy crisis. Now, gasoline increases in America with prosperous American workers doesn't take a big enough bite out of their paycheck. But you get into countries like Brazil, in Mexico, and these third world shitholes, and oh my God, it is a game changer, so much so that people have taken to the streets in Brazil and have actually rioted and shut down supplies to store where the Brazilian government's come in and said they're going to roll back fuel increases for 4 months. OPEC saw this, and Donald Trump said, wait, what's going on here? $3, $3.50, $4 gasoline stops my Billy Bob? Oh, no. So Donald Trump said, listen, guys, you got to stop with this increases here. You got to roll this back. The price is too high. And that's exactly what they did. So under enormous pressure, and I mean enormous pressure, Saudi Arabia, you want those weapons that are going to keep you from having to become Shiite Muslims when they overrun you? Okay. Russia, you want a friendship, or are we going to go more sanctions here? And they backed down. And immediately that took $10 out of the price of oil. It will in time rally back as expected, another $20 out. And now you've got the perfect storm. Oil prices, energy crisis, Fed raising rates, dollar in high prices. See, remember, the global sovereign debt basically rests on the biggest debt issuing, debt negotiating, debt selling market in the United States of America, and debt buying market, and that is America. So as the dollar goes higher and interest rates go higher, the cost of servicing your sovereign debt goes higher and higher and higher. And that means that interest rates are going higher. That means the cost of the national debt and the carry goes higher, and it filters through the economy. So with all of those combinations of events, you can understand why you've got a stock market that's still down for the year. Oh, Donald, you are so great. You've got an oil market that is collapsing. You've got a dollar that's soaring. You've got a euro and pound that are crashing, and it's wipeout city. And this gets worse, okay, because we have now entered a global recession. We have got a global sovereign debt crisis, and everyone's going, whoa, wait a minute. I thought my broker Slamma retirement calculator told me that. Holy shit, a 7% 100-year bond from Argentina was a great bargain, and stuff it in my retirement account. And all of a sudden you go, well, wait a minute. If it loses 70% of its value, I ain't got nothing. I'm getting wiped out. And now you've got a crisis where the Mexican peso is crashing. You've got a situation where Venezuela, they're actually using the currency as wallpaper. You have got a debt crisis and a currency crisis out of Brazil. You've got Turkey that's in crisis. You now have got a debt crisis absolutely with rates soaring out of Italy. It's spilling over into Spain. Portugal is very quiet, but their debt problems never left them. And Greece is coming back alive again. And now all of a sudden, the whole world is in shits. Now, you don't hear much about Asia. See, China must be very, very quiet. They have debt that's 3.5 times their GDP. An incredible number, never achieved. So part of the Chinese miracle is that the Chinese Communist Party, because of its total control, was able to create debt in an unparalleled basis, and debt they'll never be paid back. So you are on the verge of another stock market crash. I mean, you've seen a couple 1,000-point down days, the biggest ever, but that ain't shit compared to happen. You have got U.S. debt skyrocketing. You have got the yield curve flattening. The Federal Reserve is going to say, well, we don't really need to raise rates, but we're just going to do maybe one more time. They're going to poo-poo it. We're going to raise rates in June. The GDP report's going to come out, and odds are, unless they really cook the books on it, it's under 3%. Remember, that was supposed to be 3.8%. Donald Trump was talking 4 and 5% GDP because America's great again. That ain't happening. Now you've got these tariff wars. You have got sanctions. You have got U.S. Treasury shutting down corporations, sanctioning individuals, going after Kim Jong-Numchucks, who's not going to give up his nukes. And you can see the turmoil that's coming. Now, what's even uglier is that you are now headed for the elections. 4 months of campaigning. 4 months of blow and go. 4 months of posturing. And what is it all about? Well, they are trying to make sure that the good guys win. Now, who are the good guys? Well, that depends on who you talk to. And in this cloud of all these incredible, diverse interests, we've politicized the entire planet. Donald Trump is actually making the trade wars part of the campaign. And that is an event that's going to end up devastating the economy. And remember, we were headed for recession with Donald Trump. Without Donald Trump, we're going into one. But now the problem is, trade wars. Ugly trade wars. And this only complicates the issue. It only separates the factions even further. And I'm here to announce to you that, the negative stock market will continue to plunge on balance. Oil prices will go down. U.S. will raise interest rates in the short market. Sovereign debt will start going bad, wiping out. And the dollar will soar in value as people escape their currencies and buy dollars and buy U.S. Treasuries, which is the only secure investment of our times. So we are in for one hell of a wipeout. And what is amazing is because of the political side of this thing, it's almost the perfect storm, okay? The perfect storm of a wipeout. Now remember, during the last depression, the Fed raised rates. Economy slowed down. The yield curve flattened and inverted. There was a trade war, and that depression is a famous event, even though it was in the 1930s, people talk about it like it was today. Well, we're headed for the same big mistakes. Trade wars, currency devaluations on the part of others, dollar soaring, U.S. rates going higher and crowding out everybody else. Woolah! It is the death march to oblivion. European stock markets will start falling. We already have currencies crashing in Latin America. Now, by the way, if there was an Italian lira and there was an Italian peseta again, then you would see those currencies crash. But because it's the euro, you're seeing the euro slide but not crash. The problem is the rest of Europe can't hold up the euro. Now remember, you're 7 months to a British exit. You have got a radical party that is based on, an Italian exit that's coming into power. They are in a war. The IMF is trying to neutralize them. So is the European Central Bank and pissing off people. See, they punished. Remember when Greece was talking about leaving? Well, what they did is the IMF punished them severely. And they had to just kowtow to them. But Italian is a different animal. It's the 5th largest economy. They have a huge export base. They have a diverse economy, as amazing as that may sound, but they got the Italians. And they don't give a shit. So I predict that Italy will be the next country to leave the European Union, and that's going to be a huge game changer. Huge game changer. Now, you're seeing the U.S. stock market turn down. The U.S. economy is going to slow down despite the purchasing managers' manipulative reports. You have got jobs being hired, but worker productivity not climbing, pay not going up. You are seeing consumer debt skyrocketing. You're seeing retail sales fall. I mean, look around you. So this is a sign of disaster to come. You've got credit card debt at record numbers. You've got mortgage paper outstanding at record amounts. You have got sky-high house prices. You've got wood at record prices, the lumber that goes in making those things. So you've got a disaster. And now you've got a trade war with Canada, trade war with Mexico, trade war with Europe, trade war with China, trade war with Japan, and a trade war with South Korea. Donald, is anybody you left out, buddy? And you've got a president that understands one thing, and that is self-preservation and realizing that trade wars and creating animosity, it plays to his core group, and they'll go out there and vote for him. Okay? So for Donald Trump, does he care if Europe collapses because of a trade war with him? Hell no. Does he care if the economy goes into a slowdown, in a recession, if he gets elected? Double hell no. Will his constituency come out and vote for him and possibly save the House? Could happen. And so that means that until now in elections, Katie bar the door, Donald Trump becomes more desperate, the economy gets slower, the sovereign debt crisis from Latin America, now Europe, grows bigger, U.S. interest rates go higher, U.S. economy gets a bigger slowdown, interest rates go higher and the yield curve reverses. Oh my God. It is absolutely an incredible set of circumstances. I've been at this a long time, and I've never seen so many things go wrong for the global economy at once. And chief among them is that Donald Trump needs a trade war, and he needs a lot of them, in order to get reelected, and that means reelected by the House stopping the impeachment. Okay, so Donald Trump's basically facing another election. The election is that he's got to get the House over to the Republicans safely in his side with people who owe him to stop himself from being impeached. And Donald Trump believes, and I believe, and his strategy is such, that if they lose the House of Representatives, it's curtains on the Donald Trump presidency, and he will be impeached. Meanwhile, the U.S. economy is going to suffer. So you now understand the crisis we face. Prepare yourself for a stock market wipeout, oil market crashing, dollar soaring, interest rates going higher, and sovereign debt defaults with baby boomers going, well, I didn't know that I was in those shit bonds there. I thought it was a safe, secure, high-yield retirement account. And all I can say is, sucker.